All right, everybody, welcome to a really special episode of Not That Bad, where our suffering will be legendary even in hell. So, before we get into the movie that we're talking about today, we have a special guest, a very acclaimed, prestigious guest in the world of horror, Preston Fassel. You and I, we've talked before, Preston. This is your first time coming on the podcast, which we're so grateful about. Why don't you tell our audience a bit about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, thank you all for having me. This is a really cool, really fun opportunity. I'm a novelist and journalist. I've had articles published in Rue Morgue, Fangoria, Scream Magazine. For 3 years, I was a staff writer for Fangoria. I was a regular contributor to Rue Morgue between 2013 and 2017. My debut novel, Our Lady the Inferno, was the winner of the 2019 Independent Publishers Gold Medal for Horror, and I have been enjoying varying degrees of success and failure ever since. And I'm really excited to be here today to talk about one of my favorite horror franchises, and not necessarily my favorite entry in that franchise, but one that I don't feel gets the attention or respect it deserves up against some of its competition.
Man, what a big fat asterisk you put on that. But that's okay. We're all about the disclaimers here. We live off of the disclaimers. Yeah, no, yeah, you and I, Preston, have uh both contributed to Fangoria. I've submitted some freelance pieces to them, and I know you were very directly involved with them for a number of years. So, I mean, Fangoria, one of the great brands in horror, and you for Fangoria wrote a very audacious piece where you defended the indefensible. Now, that's kind of our bread and butter here. Um,
Oh
our
yeah.
whole model is bringing on these controversial movies and trying to find some way to defend them. But you took a really heavy burden upon yourself because you defended, of all things, Hellraiser Revelations, which is the bottom of a barrel for a franchise whose barrel extends far deep into the earth, right? Yeah, I want to turn it quickly over to my co-host Connor because I, to start off, don't have a deep connection to this franchise, much less this film. I have seen six of them now, or seven, including the recent Hulu movie. I do consider myself a casual fan. I enjoy the first five films to varying degrees. I consider the first one a classic, but that's really my relationship to this franchise. But Connor, I want to give you a chance to tell folks here about your relationship to the franchise and give us an idea about your history with this particular film.
Yes, this particular film, released in 2011 on an estimated budget of $300,000, direct-to-video movie here with a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, based on 5 critic reviews, and a 1.3 on Letterboxd, making it officially the lowest-rated film that we are covering in the history of Not That Bad. So we have to show it some props there. Yeah, this was a movie that so I had seen the first two Hellraiser films pretty early on when I was trying to get into horror, and I kind of decided right then and there that maybe this franchise it's not really for me. I don't think I could understand some of the things that people liked about them, but they weren't really gripping me. And for years that kind of haunted me, right? Because I'm getting into horror. I should love all the major franchises. Yeah, I should be in it. I should be deep. So I went into a movie stop one day while those were still around before those went extinct. And this exact copy of Hellraiser Revelations was on sale for $3. And I thought, you know what? I've never heard of Hellraiser Revelations, but I got to give this franchise another shot. Maybe the older movies weren't for me. It's the new movies that I should be giving a chance to. I don't look down on direct to DVD movies. So I picked this here up. And when I tell you that my first watch was the worst experience that I have ever had watching a horror movie, I would be lying because Mama exists, but it'd be close. This movie haunted me for years. I didn't hate it enough to break it. I mean, I did spend $3 on it. That's $3 that I can't get back. So I figured might as well keep it in the collection, maybe trick somebody someday, give it to them and let them know how great it is and just unleash it onto their life. But never got the chance to do it. And so it sits here today. And for 9 years, 8 or 9 years now, I have not picked this DVD back up until today to watch it again. So this movie has haunted me
It's kind
personally
of
in my
like
life for
fate, right?
years.
It's kind of
Yeah.
been calling you
Oh,
slowly.
it's yeah. Oh, I mean,
Because
and I opened the box and my perversions and and everything came rushing towards me. That this movie was my punishment, I
we
think.
have
And let's find out if I felt that way this time around as
we
well.
have foreshadowed a Hellraiser Revelations episode throughout the
Yeah.
years, I mean, because I think it's kind of a great white shark of straight to DVD, schlocktastic, utterly irreputable horror movies. But the problem is that I couldn't think of anyone who would actually want to come on and defend it to make the case for Hellraiser Revelations. We want to have at least one real viewpoint for the movie's defense.
Of
And then
course.
Preston, I wanted to bring you on the podcast. I asked you what you wanted to talk about, and you nominated Hellraiser Revelations. So I want to turn it back to you, Preston. I want to know briefly before we get into the whole discussion about the film. Why did you pick Hellraiser Revelations? And also, if you could put it in the context of your relationship to this franchise, because I believe you said it's one of your favorite franchises.
Yeah, so Hellraiser and Friday the 13th are the two horror movie franchises that are in constant battle for me as
Yeah.
which one is my favorites. And they both scratch different itches for me. Friday the 13th is this retro, old school. I'm just going to watch really gnarly kills, and Jason is a really cool monster. And isn't this a great franchise? Sort of experiences for me. And then I also think that Jason is a really psychologically interesting horror movie monster that doesn't get all of the in-depth exploration that he necessarily warrants or deserves. And I feel like there's just been a lot of missed opportunities with the Friday the 13th franchise, and I like to fill those in myself. There's this episode of Frasier where Frasier and Niles have just come back from a restaurant and they're talking about the meal, and I'm paraphrasing here, but one of them says the only thing better than a really great meal is a really great meal with one thing wrong with it that you can complain about for the rest of the night. And with and with Friday the 13th, I feel like because they were constantly changing directors and changing writers, that there were these missed opportunities in terms of continuity and development of the Jason character that just got lost. Hellraiser is just so startlingly original. When that came onto the landscape, there wasn't anything quite like it. I don't think there's been anything quite like it since. I think that Clive Barker is the closest to that this generation, the last generation, probably the next generation is going to get to our own H.P. Lovecraft. The Cenobites, their whole mythology was just so startlingly unique to me when I came across this. And the originality behind that's just really jumped out at me. And so it's, do I want something that's a little more cerebral, something that's a little more about world building and about mythos and about things that you can't comprehend and the exploration of the unknown, or do I want to watch a giant mutant hillbilly zombie in a hockey mask kill teenagers? And so there's this psychological, emotional tug of war between the two different franchises. Hellraiser has a little bit more sentimentality for me, though, because the original Hellraiser movie is the very first movie my wife and I watched after getting married back in 2010.
Oh,
And
And
that's how you do it, folks. For anybody looking to get hitched, that's
yes.
that I want you to look at Preston and his wife as role models. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
And she's a big horror movie fan. I'm a big horror movie fan. I had just seen it for the first time recently, and I found it in a bargain bin at Walmart for like $5. I had never seen any of the Hellraiser movies at that point. I was really trying to fill in the gaps in my horror education. Back in 2010, and even still to this day, I'm the sort of person who can sit down and talk shop with you about some movie that played for 1 week on 42nd Street in 1982 and has never seen the inside of a movie theater since, and everybody involved with it is dead now. And up until a couple years ago, I had never seen like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6. So I
Oh
have really,
wow.
yeah, I'd really been trying to aggressively fill in these gaps in my education. I had never seen any of the Hellraiser movies, and I figured for $5 you can't go wrong. And so I pick it out of the bargain bin. I was just completely blown away. It's the first movie my wife and I watch after we get married, and we spent the first year of our marriage tracking down and watching all of the Hellraiser movies. And this became like a big couples activity for us, was watching the Hellraiser movies. We read the Hellbound Hearts. We read the Boom comics that were coming out at the time. Back in 2011, we were living in San Antonio, not far from a comic shop that was getting in the Boom Studio comics that were coming out at that time. Every month we were there to grab the new issue when it came out. And so this was a big thing for us. And we caught up on all the Hellraiser movies, and it was this nice sense of accomplishment. We've seen them all up to Hellworld at this point. And our apartment was also within walking distance of a Blockbuster. This was one of the, to my knowledge, don't quote me on this, but to my knowledge, one of the last Blockbusters in Texas before they all went down. And it was like a quarter mile from our apartment. You could actually walk there. And one day we go in there to rent a movie, and here's Hellraiser Revelation. And all of a sudden it's, whoa, there's one more Hellraiser movie for you to watch. And so this became this big Friday night thing for us. My wife enjoys cooking as a hobby. She cooked a nice big meal and made a bowl of popcorn and sat down and watched Hellraiser Revelations. And so this is a movie that's got a lot of sentimentality set up for me, and I've got a lot of other feelings about it as well. But that's my brief history with the Hellraiser franchise broadly, and with this movie specifically.
I love that, and I want
Love it.
to expand on that and know. Did you know anything of Revelation's reputation going into that first watch?
The one thing I knew is that it had been made for legal reasons, because I am a consummate film nerd and a
Hmm.
consummate information junkie. Back at the last in-office job I had before COVID, people around the office would call me Preston Wikipedia Fossil. That was my nickname around the office, is because I've got to absorb new and unknown information about a piece of pop culture. And I don't do that because I want to hold it over somebody. I don't do that because it's like, oh, I know more than you. It's just there is a joy for me in the acquisition of information and knowledge. And just to be able
Yeah.
to have that for myself and then to be able to share that with other people is a source of tremendous joy and satisfaction for me. And so I had been digging into the history and making of all of the different Hellraiser movies, and about this like direct to DVD netherworld that parts 5 through 8 occupied. And so I knew going into it that there was a legal snafu, that they had been obliged to make this movie to hold on to rights, that there was some strife involving getting Doug Bradley to come back to play Pinhead, and whether or not this was going to get the blessing of certain people. I did not know 100% all of the specifics, and I would not learn those until sometime later. But I did know going in that this did not have the most stellar genesis.
Yeah, that clause of requiring a movie to be produced every couple of years to hold on to the rights, that clause is actually the main thing that's responsible for, I would say, the majority of films in any of these franchises that we
Oh
talk
yeah.
about. That single clause, that single legal um, detail is responsible for this kind of legacy of these long running franchises outside of horror too. I mean, that's why there's that um, Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie that never got released that was made just to hold on to rights. So that has really been almost the kind of fire that lit the cult cinema machine that I think has pumped out all of these infamous movies, whether they be adaptations, sequels, all of it. So I just find it funny that all roads lead back to that one clause that seems to be in all of these contracts. Uh, so as you mentioned, Doug Bradley did not return to play Pinhead for the first time. As of this recording, his last time playing Pinhead was Hellraiser, Hellworld, and just like Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, there's really no hope of him coming back to that role. But there are a few a few other voices who were a part of the film's production that did publicly talk about their dissatisfaction with how the film turned out. So don't just talk to the haters, the critics who piled onto this movie from day one. Let's hear from one of the lead actors who in a stunning move that I think must have defied the wisdom of his publicist. He made a comment. He didn't he didn't do an interview or even make a statement on social media. He left a comment on a video about Hellraiser Revelations, and I'm going to read this to you. This is from the actor who plays Steven. Dude, I couldn't agree more. During Hellraiser Revelations, we had 7 different scripts and 13 days to shoot. We had scenes that were written that day. The found footage was only added several months after we had finished the original film, which, again, I agree is terrible. To this day, it's the one film that I am most ashamed of, as I feel like the real Hellraiser fans deserved so much better. Now, that has to make me laugh for the reason that at this point, the Hellraiser fandom is as beaten and abused as any fandom can be. I mean, almost to the point of being discarded and like a lost civilization. The whatever status and clout that franchise had, the Hellraiser franchise had, and the fandom that surrounded it. I mean, by 2011, after 3, 4, 5 direct-to-DVD sequels that weren't even originally meant to be Hellraiser films, as you mentioned in your Fangoria article about this film, Preston, that this is actually the first one of that direct-to-DVD era to at least have been originally envisioned as a Hellraiser sequel. So that's the funny thing about Revelations to me, and I think why I feel so distanced from it is if it is the nadir of the franchise, it comes after I think most people had checked out. And I think if Doug Bradley had come back to play Pinhead, I don't even think this would have really registered in such a strong way for people. So that's kind of my opening thesis for all this and my personal viewpoint, but I have a feeling I'm going to moderate the real arguments or the real discussion that's going to be had as, again, a more distanced Hellraiser person. So Connor, I'm curious, you mentioned how much this movie offended you. Had you seen the other direct-to-DVD sequels that preceded this?
So at the time, I had seen 4 Hellraiser films. So I had seen the first 2, and then I saw Hellworld, and I saw oh man, what's the one with the green cover?
Isn't that Hellworld?
Was that Hellworld?
That's one with Henry Cavill, right?
Okay, so I might be mixing it up. I know I had seen 4. I had seen 4 of the movies before I saw this. So I wasn't super in tune and catching up with them because I knew it wasn't for me. I just happened to see this, and it was actually kind of cool to hear about the connection with you and your wife, because my now wife, at the time girlfriend, that was like our thing. We would go into Movie Stop and we would find movies that we had never heard of or things like that. And we'd pick them up, and it always worked out. Like Trick or Treat, that's how we found that movie. We had found several others. My first copy of Rob Zombie's Halloween I got from there. So there was a lot of things that I enjoyed, and I thought this would be one of them, and we just never got a chance to watch it together, so I watched it on my own. But yeah, I had seen 4 Hellraiser films before this. I wasn't super into the franchise. This film was my attempt to find a place in the fandom.
So this didn't offend you as a Hellraiser fan?
No, not at all. Actually, we'll get into this a little later, but I think not being a Hellraiser fan ultimately kind of hurt, especially this time when I was rewatching it.
Because that's not usually how that happens, right?
I know.
It's the fans that get offended.
I know. I don't even feel like I have a right to be offended, dude. Like I feel like when I watched this for the first time, I was like, oh my God. I remember my wife asking me like, oh, what'd you watch this week? And I told her, a couple movies, including this one. She's like, any of them suck? And I was like, yeah, actually, one of them did. And I told her how much I was so mad. And I was like, and I don't know why I'm so mad because it's not like, they massacred my boy. It's not that. It's just like, I just was so, and I'll get into it as we go, but like, sometimes I feel I don't have a right to be as offended as I am.
So why don't we give Preston a chance to really start making the case for Hellraiser Revelations? And I wanted to start with this quote from your Fangoria article defending it, Preston, because I did latch on to this, and it's something I definitely noted in my viewing that Revelations was the first entry since Hellraiser Inferno to willfully wade into the uncomfortable wedding of sex and death, which I think is really the defining characteristic of what I would say is the core Hellraiser films, the one that really bear the influence of Clive Barker's style and his
It's a
voice.
great quote too.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
and the way it manifested, the execution of it, I don't know if it landed for me as a redeeming quality of the movie, but it did register far more than any other quality of the film. So, why do you think it's so important for a Hellraiser movie to exhibit that kind of provocative intersection between torment and pleasure?
So the thing that was intriguing to me about the Hellraiser series to begin with was that the Cenobites were so different from other horror movie monsters in that they're not really the bad guys. They're not really
Mm,
bad guys. They're completely amoral. I really love TV tropes, and on TV tropes, there's this concept they call blue and orange morality. And it gets
mm,
applied a lot in sci-fi stories where some space crew will encounter a society whose conception of what is right and what is wrong is so far removed from anything that's we as people could understand that there's no way to call it good or evil because their standards are so radically different. And it's not black and white, it's not shades of gray, it's blue and orange. And with the Cenobites, that's sort of their whole deal. They are just these compulsive sense freaks. And it's
mhm.
not necessarily about sex. It's not necessarily about torment or torture. They're just after new experiences and seeking, beyond the realm of human experience. And that was a really interesting idea to me. Count Dracula is this undead monster who feeds on the blood of the living. The Wolfman is this uncontrolled id monster that transforms and kills. Freddy Krueger is just a monster. He's just a child predator. Jason, I could do a whole podcast about Jason. All of these other iconic horror movie monsters have what most people would consider to be a malevolent motivation. Whereas in their original incarnation, the Cenobites are just these creatures that are after the next great experience. And that's not something that we've ever really seen before or since. And you can start to see a real decay with the quality and the originality of the Hellraiser films and the Hellraiser franchise when somebody sat down and decided at some point, fuck it, they're just demons. And that to me strips away so much of the originality and so much of what made Hellraiser fun and new and unique and boundary breaking and narrative breaking in the first place was we've had those stories before. We've had Rosemary's Baby. We
Mhm.
have Race with the Devil. We have Night of the Demons. We have all of these other pieces of media where the Christian conception of demons and what they are and mean and do have been exploited as the monster of this particular piece of media. And just reducing the Cenobites to, oh, they're demons, but they're like sex freak demons and they wear S&M gear and leather. It isn't that freaky. It's just not as interesting or provocative to me as these extra dimensional entities that come from some realm beyond the conception of human understanding and whose motivations and desires and drives are maybe beyond the conception of human understanding as well. And that's what one of the big appeals to me is with Revelation is that it is really trying, or at least somebody wanted to try. I don't know how much real passion or love or motivation there was behind, but it is an effort to bring the Cenobites back around to their origins. And that's something that's intriguing to me about the movie is that whoever was behind the scenes on this, somebody at least had an understanding and love for the franchise because it would have been so easy if you've got to do this. I think they call it an ash can copy. I think that's the original the term for it.
I
You
think
mentioned
that's Doug Bradley's quote about the movie.
okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
because there's this legal concept you mentioned before about you've got to exploit an intellectual property every so often or else the rights reverts. And if I recall correctly, that goes back to comics. I believe that these rights issues and having to use a character or concept every so often before the rights revert to somebody else began in the comics world. And I think the casual term for it is an ash can copy because
Mm.
the idea was you would make this thing, you would copyright it. If anybody ever needed to know about it, you've got the paper trail to prove that it existed, but all you were going to do with it was just toss it in the trash. And this was, maybe never really meant to see the light of day or meant to see a very limited light of day.
It was the
Uh,
first sequel in a long time, since the 90s, to receive any kind of theatrical release. I believe a limited 1 week run. And I don't know if possibly that was also any kind of contractual obligation, because I believe for some of these clauses, depending on how they're negotiated, some kind of theatrical window of some kind of scale is an
yes.
obligation. I don't know if that's the story here, but it is curious to me that Hellworld, for whatever you want to say about it, had the production quality, I think, of a theatrical release, a lower tier theatrical release, and the
Yeah.
300K Hellraiser movie finally graced cinemas again in some in some menial form. But I also wanted to ask Preston, talking about the franchise now, where do you think that decay, as you put it, started to set in, and when do you think it really took hold? I think that's something fans argue about, is when did the downfall start? I mean, some people think it started as early as Hellraiser 2. I think some people can, consider the first movie to be the only one really worth a damn, and other people say, well, no, it kind of, there were peaks and valleys, from 1 through 4. Some people actually defend Hellraiser Inferno. Now that Scott Derrickson has enjoyed quite a career, I think a lot of people go back and definitely look for hints of his talents in that movie for sure. So I'm curious what you think is the linear timeline of the downfall of Hellraiser.
It's really for me, it starts with number three. And I think that's because number three is where they really got a lot of money injected into it. It really broke into the mainstream. And I feel this is where they had to start paring down some of the more uncomfortable potential sexual elements behind it, because I don't think that's something that would have played very easily in mainstream cinemas in early 90s in the United States. Hellraiser 3, I believe, is also the first entry in the franchise that was really geared towards a major United States theatrical release.
Mm.
There's a very British sensibility about the first two movies, and number three is where we really get this American sensibility that gets injected into the franchise.
Well, it's where they
And
turned Pinhead into Freddy Krueger, really.
exactly, and that's where I really feel the decay starts. Is Pinhead was meant to be the sort of antithesis to the slashers of the 80s, and now all of a sudden they just make him one of the slashers of the 80s. And this is where I feel like they felt the compulsion to become more reductive with the characters. It's like we can't have this really deep and complex mythos behind the Cenobites. They can't be like these extra dimensional entities. That's something that's maybe a little too highbrow that won't play in Peoria. And so,
Mm-hmm.
oh, scratch all that. They're demons now. Fuck it, they're demons. Sally and Tommy in Middle America go to church on Sundays and they know who the devil is and they know who Satan is and they know what hell is. Well, you know what? This freaky dude with the leather and the pins in his head, he's the devil. Fuck it, we're going with that. And after that is where the franchise just really starts to just keep sliding downward into this whole the Cenobites are just demons and devils thing. Uh Inferno as a movie, I think is great. as a Hellraiser movie, I'm very iffy on, but as a movie, I actually think Inferno is a great direct to VHS horror film. There's that scene where the guy gets whipped to death in the ice cream truck, and it keeps
Mhm.
cutting back to the detective's reaction to it, and we just hear these sounds and his responses to it. That's one of the most upsetting things I think I've seen in a horror movie. I think that it was all on display from the beginning with Scott Derrickson.
Mhm.
He hit the ground running and just had the misfortune to have his work backdoored into a franchise that he had nothing to do with in the first place.
Well, I think misfortune is a strong word. I think
Yeah.
he definitely bounced back at some point. The Black Phone 2, I think, is on its way, and probably it's probably a franchise in the making unto itself. But Connor, turning back to you, since you're the
Oh,
hater of the episode, you're the antagonist of the episode. No,
I'll be a villain. I'm cool with that.
I mean, before we get to your quibbles, if you will, with this film,
Okay.
hearing about its actual thematic relationship to the Hellraiser mythos, to hear that it actually does um, attempt to do something to honor the franchise in some way, or at least make a statement of its own in some way. Does that affect your feelings about this movie at all?
Maybe a little bit of sympathy, but other than that, really no, because that's the thing. Like, this was my attempt to get into Hellraiser again. This was like, okay, I was desperate. You don't understand, okay? Like, I want to belong when it comes to horror movies. Like, I wanted to for a long time. Not anymore. I mean, as a guy who puts Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 at the top of my Halloween ranking, obviously, I don't fit into a lot of conventions, especially when it comes to franchises that I enjoy. I just like what I like.
Yeah, I sort of think of
But
you as more of a proud contrarian, not like
yeah,
somebody desperate to
well,
fit
see,
in.
like when I was first getting into horror, like, I didn't know anybody that liked horror movies. I didn't know
Mhm.
anybody who was into that world. And I just knew that I watched a movie one time when I was 9 years old, and then I watched the other one when I was 10, and it scared the shit out of me. That's all I knew. And so I got really excited about the prospect of getting into this world and finally, starting to collect. I had collected like James Bond DVDs before that, but like I really hadn't done anything with horror. And so I just wanted to have a film in every franchise that I could talk about. So at least when I would talk to someone who, you know, um, maybe they don't like the movie that I like, I could passionately defend something that they enjoy in a sense, even if it's loose. And so my first viewing of Hellraiser Revelations came from a place of desperation to get into that franchise, and it failed me there. And so, like, I don't have the connection to the franchise to say, like, oh, well, at least they tried,
Yeah.
because that doesn't affect me at all. I mean, like, I feel bad, and it makes me feel worse for the people who are involved who do care. It seems like the writer who was the makeup effects turned writer, um, uh, you know, it seemed like he kind of had a grasp on what Hellraiser was about to its core fans, and I think that's great. I think the issue that I ran into though is that redeeming factor for most people does not do anything for somebody who's not a core fan. And we'll see kind of how that kind of ties in throughout this. And the Fangoria article that you wrote was great in kind of detailing that for me and making me understand how somebody could come around to this movie, or somebody could even look at it as like oh, well, it's not my favorite, but at least it did something, and I appreciate it for doing something. Because I didn't see that perspective at all
Mhm.
before I read that article. I'm excited to hopefully have it driven down here more.
Yeah,
But
the incest just came and went for you, right? Just in one ear, out the other.
I'm really interested to see how this episode ends, because I don't anticipate this being a Child's Play 3 situation, but there is a chance
Where
that
you
maybe I could
drastically
look
change your mind for
right.
context. That's an instance where you went from really at least not liking something to some extent to
Yeah.
coming out on the other side. But I think the better example is Halloween Ends, because I remember your half
Yeah.
star review of that on Letterbox when you first saw it, and now it's
Yeah.
What is in your ranking? It's like in the top three or top four, right?
No, no,
Something
no, no.
crazy.
It's in
No?
the it's in the top 10 somewhere. Maybe not that bad. Maybe that bad media rather will have a Halloween ranking up sometime in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully they'll be able to see that from the release of this leading up to Halloween. But gotta leave them hanging. But it's
Yeah,
not in my top three, but it's high.
it's high. Okay.
Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, another great example. I almost broke that disc in half the first viewing that I had, and now it's my favorite horror movie of all time. Don't see this one going that route. However, at least maybe I can look at it like a wounded animal. So I say let's talk about the movie a little bit more, and yeah, we'll see where it goes. I think though, I want to ask you guys about the opening for this movie because it's kind of jarring, especially if you don't remember this movie a lot or you're going into it for the first time. We kind of just jump right into these characters in a found footage esque situation.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, Pinhead's there. Like within the first few minutes of the movie, there he is in all of his glory. I don't know. I don't know what to call it in this. I guess I'll start with Preston here. Like, how did this opening? Did it leave an impression on you at all when you guys first watched it together?
Yeah, I really got the impression that they were eager to tell people, yes, this is a Hellraiser film. You're here for Pinhead. We know you're here for Pinhead. Here's Pinhead.
Although say
Uh,
goodbye to him for a while. I mean,
yeah,
they kind of sprinkle him in a little more liberally than the previous few ones, but I think some people might have gotten the impression that Pinhead was going to own the movie again, which hadn't happened since the '90s. But that was certainly not the case. Probably because they were not entirely confident about this new actor's ability to match up to Doug Bradley. But continue, Preston.
yeah, I feel like it's an intentional choice. It's not necessarily one I agree with, but I get where they were coming from because it really seemed that especially with the direct to DVD movies, that it was a matter of getting Doug Bradley on set for 1, 2 days, sticking him in the Pinhead makeup, and just as they shoehorned the character into scripts where he didn't already belong, they had to shoehorn Doug Bradley into the shoots of these movies as quickly and as efficiently as they could. And I mean, in some of these movies, he's in there for like what, like 2, 3 minutes of screen time. And I mean, there's a fine line between having a character in a movie and kind of narrow focusing, laser focusing them and, precision. That my mind's deteriorating. Uh, uh, Beetlejuice and Hannibal Lecter, I think, are prime examples of this. Michael
Yeah.
Keaton's only in something like 19 minutes of Beetlejuice, which is like an hour and a half long movie, but every minute he's on screen, damn it, he is taking charge of it. Hannibal Lecter is not actually on screen in Silence of the Lambs that much, and Anthony Hopkins still won an award for it, and people are still quoting him to this day.
Yeah.
Pinhead was never meant to be the central star of the movies. These movies were never about Pinhead showing up with an Uzi and mowing down terrorists like he's Schwarzenegger in Commando or something. It was about these precision strikes with the character, but those precision strikes had started to dwindle with these direct-to-video entries in the series. And it almost got to the point where it was, why is this even a Hellraiser movie? And I feel like having Pinhead show up off the bat in Revelation in the opening moments of the movie, it was a case of, this is a Hellraiser movie. This isn't a movie that was originally something else. Pinhead wasn't originally the devil. He wasn't originally, John Smith, the serial killer. We didn't do a find replace on this.
Right.
This was always meant to be Pinhead. Here he is. You can relax. This is a Hellraiser movie.
What I like about this opening is a dynamic that I really wish they had followed through on, which I thought we were going to get Harold and Kumar Go to Hell. Like I thought we were going to get a buddy comedy traipsing through and accidentally stumbling into the world of Hellraiser. And there are ingredients that would not have allowed for that dynamic to flourish, namely the acting. And I do not want to get hard on any of the actors. I'm sure
Yeah.
they struggled with the rewrites. They struggled with direction and hectic shoot. And obviously, the lead actor playing Steven and then Nico as Steven did not come out, proud of his work on that, which is unfortunate to see, to the extent that he felt he had to publicly speak about it and disown the movie. But I still think that's a dynamic the movie would have benefited more from. I really wish every line of dialogue in this movie ended with the name Nico. I was just really getting a kick out of how often they were throwing that around in that bathroom. I would never do
Yeah.
that to you, Nico. Nico,
It was
don't do
great.
this.
It was
I
great.
get I get the impression somebody had played GTA 4 in close proximity to writing this script. Just really got focused on the name Nico.
And then
Oh
our,
man.
our flashbacks to their misadventures in Mexico, as aggravating as those characters are, um, there was a pulse of something. It was probably not something that most people would be comfortable spending a lot of time with. These are two characters that you would struggle to follow throughout the movie, but I still think it would have of honored the tradition of Hellraiser more, because this is not a franchise about comfortability. Um, and seeing these two dickheads get their comeuppance and in the gruesome ways that they do, I think that would have offered a bit more of satisfaction, catharsis to the audience experience than shifting that over to their family, who I don't feel like we get to know really, other than being extensions of these two characters, with the exception of the sister, who apparently does have some kind of hots for her brother, and that was certainly a personality trait that I did not forget. Um,
No.
by the
No. Hard
time
to
the
forget.
credits rolled, yeah.
Hard to scrub from your brain when you when you finish watching this one. And luckily we don't get that until pretty deep into the movie. And one positive that I will give to this film overall is that this is, I mean, if you don't like any movie, any length of anything is a long time. But the fact that this movie's only 75 minutes did help. I mean, my wife, when I watched this earlier today, was in another room and she goes, "Is the movie over?" And I was like, "Yeah, it just ended." He goes, "Oh, well, that didn't take a lot of time." And I was like, no, it really, it's a shorter movie, and big chunks of time maybe feel like they're there. I felt like I hadn't taken notes for a while, and honestly, most of my notes are just quotes from the movie. But I
Nico,
was like,
Nico,
man,
Nico,
I
Nico. That's
yeah,
that's
it's
all my
just basically
notes.
all Nico. No,
Yep.
but it's just it's kind of, I don't know. When you just said that you were thinking this would be like a two buddies stumble into the Hellraiser situation, that's a movie that I would absolutely be interested in seeing even now. And I know that the franchise is kind of in a better place a little bit. I know that the last one was a lot of people recommended it to me. They said that it was quite good.
It was
But
definitely a return to form and had some clout to it.
yeah,
The screenwriters of The Night House, and more importantly to me, Super Dark Times, one of my favorite films in the last 10 years. And then obviously the director of The Night House. So yeah, I mean, just seeing talent attached
yeah,
to this franchise again, um, was kind of enough. I don't even think I needed to see the movie in order to kind of breathe a sigh of relief, to just know that it's back in more than capable hands. I'm not sure about the fate of the franchise. Maybe that's something we can get into at the end, because I have no
yeah.
idea if there's any development going on for a continuation of that other movie. But what say you, Preston, to this proposal? Would you like to see Harold and Kumar go to hell? Is that the movie that you think this could have been, or are you happy that we have the actual the setup and the premise that we do have?
No, I definitely would have liked to have seen that one myself. I feel like one of the best executions for a Hellraiser movie is taking different types of people from different walks of life, different situations, and seeing what happens when you throw them up against the Cenobites. I really feel like a couple of the direct to VHS movies almost stumbled into this territory, and I just really wish that they had done more with that. And I feel like a dark buddy comedy slash travelogue movie where they stumble up against the lament configuration could have been really cool. And I understand why we didn't get that because of budgetary constraints. No matter what else I can say about this movie, it wears its lack of its budget right there on its sleeve.
Are you saying that
Boy,
they
does it.
had budgetary constraints on this movie?
What gave it away?
I
What
mean,
I
what
really
could
love that
possibly give that away?
I love that the camcorder they're shooting the found footage stuff with is only marginally worse than the camera they actually used for the
Yeah.
real parts of the movie. And that's something that has to be addressed. And for me, this actually cuts both ways in terms of my ability to enjoy the movie and my ability to empathize with the people who hate it. Say what you will about the previous Hellraiser direct to DVD movies, they look like real movies. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
going back and maybe this speaks to the state of of photography and in major film releases, but just the fact that they're shooting it on film with these people who are clearly veterans of the craft and clearly look to previous generations for lighting schemes and all of that. And now the I think the vast majority of films that come out in theaters or streaming more closely resemble like Honda commercials in terms of their photography. So that's the Hellraiser movies for me until you get to this one. And this is almost Uwe Ball territory for me in terms of production
Oh yeah.
value. And I think my favorite example of that is the bar that they hang out in Mexico, which looks suspiciously like an abandoned studio lot. With its tin walls.
It wasn't the Mexican hotel rooms that looked like they were all in the same set area. It wasn't there's
I was
the
having
lack of
deja vu
set
with
dressing, and there was
the two hooker murder scenes in the hotel rooms. I really thought I thought Tubi accidentally rewound the movie on me when they walked back into that hotel
But you got to
room,
watch
kind of
out.
like
You got to
Groundhog
watch
Day.
out for the Asian American hookers in Mexico. It can cause you some problems, and clearly it caused him some problems. When watching, dude, oh my God, I want to applaud them for the scenes that are actually in this Cenobite area because those I think are the best looking parts of the movie. But like, look, you guys filmed most of this in one place, and you
In
can't even
some
make that
producer's
place look
house,
good.
I'm sure.
And they didn't, but like, like we know low budget filmmakers. I know one because I host this show with a low budget filmmaker, and yeah, you were able to, you made a script that was more in the found footage category, so it's a little easier to hide budgetary constraints when
all
you
of it in the found footage
yeah.
category. But that I would then put this out into the conversation that I would have been fine for a found footage Hellraiser experience. I think a lot of people, that's the worst thing they've ever heard. That's the worst idea they've ever heard, a found footage Hellraiser.
I mean, our friend Cody Leach said something like that in his review about how terrified he was that this was going to be a found footage a version of the Hellraiser movies.
Yeah.
But that sounded more interesting to me, and I don't even love found footage movies.
No, but what it would have covered up the many blemishes of the production. But here's the other side of it for me. This movie, it was like they hired Ed Wood to direct a Hellraiser sequel, or it had the same kind of like curious, something at the bottom of your shoe type of filmmaking of like, what is this? Who made this? It was just
Dude,
the product
at one point
of
in my notes, I seen this movie before. I don't know what part of the movie I did. I didn't put anything else, but I just put, bro, what the fuck is going on?
So, and that's just talking about the merits of the production.
Yeah.
No, there are some things I can compliment. And Preston, you did note that the effects were uneven, but I think some people would acknowledge that not all of the effects, but some of the effects, some of the blood, some of the torment. So we have a lot of faceless people running around in this movie, and I always thought that was a highlight of the effects work. I mean, do you think that these are important qualities for you when you watch this movie, Preston. Like the 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 subpar production. That's all of the budget constraints are so visible on the film. Is that something that informs how you experience the movie one way or another, or is it just, obviously this is now a low budget franchise, it's been straight to DVD for years, you just take the good with the bad?
Yeah, I'm of two minds on this. On the one hand, I sort of feel inoculated to this sort of thing, going back to me watching movies that like played for 1 week in a movie theater in Times Square in 1982 and have never been seen again. So, I've seen my share of movies where the blood is obviously Karo syrup, and on the
Yeah.
on the film stock that they used, it ended up looking orange on my TV screen. Or where they very obviously overdubbed the entire cast because this movie is supposed to be set in middle America, but they could only get people from Staten Island. And they didn't
Yeah.
want the entire cast of the film to sound like this, even though it's meant to be taking place in Indiana. And, so I've seen all of these movies that have, more shortcuts on it than I don't know what. So on one hand, it doesn't bother me. On the other hand, if you have a certain sum of money that you're going to use on a movie and it's a limited sum of money, I feel like instead of spreading it around and everything being of a low value, that you should choose one area and make that good. Maybe the special effects are really great, but you don't have the greatest caliber of actors. Or maybe you've got really incredible up and coming actors and you paid them a little bit more and the special effects are really bad. Or maybe you sprung for a really great camera and this movie just looks incredible, but the acting and the SFX are crap. Here, it doesn't feel like they precision struck the budget anywhere. It is like we're just going to spread it evenly. We're going to allocate, 10% of the budget here, 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 and however the chips may fall, that's where they fall. Would I have liked for this to have been a better looking movie? Yes. Would I have liked for this to have been a better acted movie? Yes. Would I have liked for the special effects to have been better? Yes. Would I have liked for them to have used a better camera? Yes. Um, Part of me almost wishes that they had just said fuck it and gone out and gotten like an 80s era shoulder mounted your dad on Christmas morning VHS camcorder and
Yeah.
been like, you know what, guys, this is Hellraiser 1984 edition, and just like really leaned into that
You
lack of a
could have,
budget.
I mean,
Yeah.
what, VHS 85, VHS 99, VHS beyond, right? I mean, that's fashionable now.
Yeah.
And that this movie could have broken some ground by doing so, or it could have played it safe, and it it could have rode the wave of found footage, which is still going strong at this time. I'm actually
Yeah.
surprised that they didn't commit to that. Uh, I'm curious to see if there was a conversation about that. Although I guess you couldn't have really brought that into the fold of the family dynamic at that house. But I definitely thought everything we were going to see of their Mexico adventure was going to be through the lens of that camcorder
Yeah.
in a found footage format. Um, because they're still stupid enough to record everything anyways, all the hookers that they kill, all the weird creepy boxes that they open up, all of the uh, you know
Uh,
random homeless men that sell them exotic
Yeah.
objects. Do you
And
think
then
that was
show
an
up at the house.
intentional callback uh the character from the first film?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and I really feel like that was the writer kind of flexing on certain viewers and like nudging another section of the viewers in the ribs. It's like, yes, I've actually watched these movies. Out of the direct to VHS movies, one of my favorites is Hellworld. I'm not 100% sold on the ending of
Hmm.
it, but I really appreciate that they had done their homework and that for like the game within the movie, like this Hellraiser based MMORPG, that like they are actually culling elements from the Hellraiser franchise for it. And that whoever did the adaptation of that script at least was a fan of the series. And so I appreciate that as a callback, if for no other reason, then it lets me know that the person who wrote this, who worked on the script for this, had at least seen earlier movies in the series. I also really appreciate that element that they do like document all of their many crimes because there is something real to that. One of the very first jobs I had out of high school was working as an intern in a police department evidence room in the town where I went to high school in Oklahoma. And you would be amazed at the level of stupidity that goes into certain crimes where they actually document this is public information because the guy went on trial. He went to prison for it. This was presented as evidence in open court. But there was this one case where there was this kid. He was like 19, 20 years old, and he was stealing credit cards and buying all of this crap online with stolen credit cards. He was keeping a spiral notebook tracking what stuff he had bought on what stolen credit card so that he made sure not to max out the limits on those cards. And like,
They Yeah,
Yeah.
no, they even have the scene that you need to have in a found footage movie to
Yep.
explain why they're recording
yeah.
everything. Why are they not deleting the video evidence of the murder that they have just committed? Why not? So we're on the same team, bro. But Nico, I would never do that to you, Nico.
Nico.
Come on,
I
Nico.
I actually disagree with you, Preston. I don't wish any of those things were better. I think that would have made this a truly forgettable experience if this was actually competently made. It's getting back to what I'm saying. I could imagine that in 50 years' time, there's going to be that club of people, not people like you, Preston, who actually would argue for the merits of this movie, but the ironic uh slash unironic, the irony vortex fandom where they go to the midnight screenings, they start screaming back the lines at the screen, and before you know it, they've watched this more than any of the others, more than the original. Every franchise has, I think, one of those that has the legs to be, the room, the movie, the room of its own
Yeah.
franchise. And I think that's part of what they're working with here. Although I think it's a little too uncomfortable, it's a little too taboo to be that kind of that kind of wholesome, almost good time fun that you associate with the viewing experience like that. I mean, is that a charm that you could find with this movie, Connor, or is it just another sin that the movie commits?
Mm. This is movies quite the sinner, my friend. Yeah, I tried this time to and I want to make sure that I make this clear as we go through. And I said that a lot of my notes are quotes from this movie because I tried this time to at least like look, I know how I felt about it last time. One of the few movies that I have ranked bottom of the barrel. It's one of the few movies that I just found no redeeming qualities in. Let me try to just have fun with what I can have fun with. And maybe it'll change my feelings about the movie. Sometimes I have fun with a movie, but I know the movie still sucks. And therefore, I'm not going to put in the effort to try to enjoy it anymore. And other times maybe I don't know ahead of time. And this time I really felt like, okay, my moods can change. I've changed opinions about movies plenty of times. Let's just try to have fun with this. And I'll admit that I got quite a few laughs out of this, but I felt this sort of, I don't know if shame's the right word, but like sometimes you watch a movie and it's okay to laugh at it. The Room is an example because now, Tommy Wiseau has come around full circle pretty much. Like he kind of knows the value the movie has as that insane human being that he is. And he gets enjoyment that people find enjoyment out of his film in that way. It doesn't seem like this movie has brought anything to this cast except for pain and a sore spot on their filmography. And so for me to sit and laugh at
But
it, I
that's
felt
it
bad in a
now.
sense.
But when the room first came out, you think people were
Oh,
proud to admit that they were in
no,
the room? Or I mean, go back
no.
to Plan 9 from Outer Space. I think still the OG of this whole
Right,
subgenre, if you will. No, people were ashamed to be a part of that. I mean, they
right.
took the money and they ran, and then this kind of reappraisal of sorts. I'm not using that word exactly correctly, but some kind of new affection
Yeah.
that people can develop for the movie. occurs. Again, I don't think this movie is exactly destined for that. I
Yeah,
think
I
as
don't think it has
long
the right pieces in place. I
No,
probably
just
not.
I
no.
don't think this franchise is built for that. And like I wanted to bring this up earlier, and I'll throw it in here now. This franchise sort of follows a similar path to the Leprechaun franchise. And when you say those two things together, you kind of are like, what are you talking about? Like, how would those two franchises have anything to do with each other? But like, and it makes me sad in a sense because again, like this is as a horror person, as somebody who loves the genre, as somebody who's all about it, like seeing a Titan. I would consider the first movie, I don't just because it's not for me doesn't mean I can't recognize its importance in the genre and its significance amongst horror fans. And to see it drop to this level, like this is a movie like Gabe, we talked about all the Leprechaun movies on our Patreon.
And we defended
Leprechaun
all of them
Origins was
except
a
except one.
yes,
Yeah.
except Leprechaun Origins. And that movie is the one that I'm going to compare to this one. Because they both represent this uh just reaching the very bottom. You may have peaked somewhere in your franchise, but now you're at the bottom and you probably are under an avalanche at this point. Because yes, I do agree that there are films that are bad that get better because they're bad. I just don't think this for me is one of them because not only just because of the pain, but A, I have no connection, and B, it's just really hard to get there. There's just so many choices that leave me questioning why did they do this? And to Preston's point earlier, if they would have targeted one specific area, I think this movie would have taken a slight turn for me. If they had just the best effects throughout the whole movie, or had some of the best acting in the worst effects and camera work I had ever seen, or honestly, what I think Hellraiser deserves, a really, really solid script. Something that will help the actors, because not everybody in this is a bad actor. I quite enjoy the Scorpion King. The guy from the Scorpion King is in this movie. The villain of the Scorpion King was one of the parents in this. And
Really?
I didn't
I
realize The
like that
Rock
actor. No, it's
was
not.
in this movie.
The Rock is the hero of the Scorpion King, sir.
That would make this
Um,
the second worst movie that The Rock has ever made, behind Black Adam.
oh, geez.
This probably made more
Well,
money than Black Adam, though. So,
it probably did off DVD sales. But no, it
I
doesn't
want to
have that for
posit
me, and it
something.
makes me sad.
I want to posit something, and I'm curious to hear your reaction to this, Preston. With everything that we're talking about, all the notoriety, all of the, again, the visible flaws, in some sense very objective flaws to this film, and all of the things that is going against it. Doug Bradley didn't return. I think Clive Barker said this didn't come from my mind, it didn't even come from my asshole. With all of that, this is actually the first time I heard anybody talking about the Hellraiser franchise. This is the first time I had heard people talking about the newly released Hellraiser film in my lifetime. Uh, I want to know if that was your experience, because it's not like I was paying attention really when I was when I guess Inferno through Hell World were coming out. I was paying more attention to SpongeBob and Barney at the time. But I want to know, is that does that mesh with your experience, and why do you think this did spark a new kind of attention to the franchise to the extent that it did?
God, I feel old now.
Sorry, this has happened too often, and I want to be diplomatic. I want to be diplomatic about this. Since I was watching the Jetsons and the Flintstones,
Yeah.
does that make you feel better?
I don't, I feel like my experience was skewed because I was a huge part of internet forums back in the day when internet forums were still a thing before Reddit really kind of took over that whole scene. And
Yeah.
so after I saw the first Hellraiser, I immediately sought out what was at the time the Hellraiser fan forum and kind of like part-time lived there, like digging into all of the other movies. And so that's where I first heard about Revelations, and I kind of followed part of the trajectory of its release there. And so I feel like my perspective on it was a little bit skewed in that way because I was in this very specific space. So I don't know what the average horror fan's experience would have been living outside of a very specific Hellraiser space in terms of this being one of the first times in years that Hellraiser had entered into like major discourse. Um, I got so sidetracked by the SpongeBob thing, I forgot the rest of the question.
Why do you think it sparked um, a new attention to the franchise? Again, to the extent that it did, because maybe our memory skewed. But I was just getting into the online space of horror fandoms. I was watching a lot of online reviewers tearing this movie apart, and I went through and I didn't see them talk about Hell World. I didn't see them talk about, other than people who, do retrospectives of whole series. Just seeing, thumbnail after thumbnail of somebody, screaming in front of this new Pinhead actor, who was behind him. Just that formula was everywhere. Everybody wanted to talk about how much they were pissed off about this movie, and it was almost like people forgot, the state that this franchise was really in. Like, this is the type of indignation that I expect from like a Halloween Resurrection, which comes after a popular entry. Seems like it just stops the momentum of the franchise dead in its tracks. So yeah, I want to hear what you think is going on there into the very loud reaction to Revelations.
There's something that's such surreal about it. It's like if after Nightmare on Elm Street 6, there had been this big gap and there's no more Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And then they're like, we're going to make another Nightmare on Elm Street. After like 10 years, you're getting a new Nightmare on Elm Street. Okay, well, is Robert Englund coming back? Well, no, we've got a new actor to play Freddy Krueger. Okay, well, who is it? Is it Jackie Earle Haley? Is it Kevin Bacon? No, no, it's this guy named Earl Sampson. Who's Earl Sampson? You've never heard of him. Okay, well, surely New Line Cinema's footing the bill for this, right? No, no. Well, who's going to put it out then? Starline Pictures. Starline Pictures. You never heard of them. Okay, well, this is like some dangerous, up and coming, edgy indie film production company, and they're gonna make it new and sexy and exciting again, right? And like we're gonna, really, they've got investors behind this, and it's gonna be like this, like grand written. No, okay, so it's like, what's the point of this then? You're bringing back A Nightmare on Elm Street, but you're not bringing back Robert Englund. New Line's not behind it. It doesn't have a budget. What are you going for here? We don't want to lose the rights. It's weird. It's like this is something, it's kind of almost like this meta thing. It's like just as Hellraiser is about forbidden secrets and things not meant for human interaction, it's almost like this is a movie that was not meant for human eyes to see. And yet,
That's a great point.
here it is.
Do you think it's almost okay? Imagine that Jessica Alba Fantastic Four movie comes out, and it does what it does at the box office. Then the Rise of the Silver Surfer comes out, and it does even less at the box office. And there's a lull after this star-studded Fantastic Four duology or something, and people are like, are they going to make a new one? And then somebody finally says, yeah, we're making a new one. And it comes out in theaters, and it's Roger Corman's Fantastic Four.
It's a good point.
I think it's
yeah.
I think it's kind of comparable to that. I think it's just the I think it's kind of canon to people that this franchise fell off a cliff and hit the bottom with Revelations, that they don't stop to see like there is still a huge something happened between Hell World and Revelations. Even though some people would argue this is actually more of a Hellraiser movie, it's certainly not more of a real movie than Hell World. So it's like an interesting tension. Like there was like an actual ode to the franchise after such a long time. If they only had the schedule and the budget and whatever resources they needed. So I'm going to return it back to the subject of this discussion, and I kind of want to get our closing thoughts on Hellraiser Revelations. I want to start with you, Preston. Anything that you wanted to continue to say in defense of it, and to hear your closing statement on it, and finally your verdict, which for you and for anybody who's listening here for the first time, we have a ranking system.
Yes.
The movie can either be that bad, not that bad, actually good, or it could be actually great, which is rare, but it has happened. I gave Jason Goes to Hell an actually great, believe it or not.
You did.
So want to turn it to you, Preston. Want to hear your closing thoughts.
So I think it's a not that bad film. It's not one of my favorite Hellraisers. I don't think that it's some secret gem. I'm not going to sit here and argue that it's actually one of the best ones in the series. It needs to be rediscovered as this fantastic Hellraiser film, as this fantastic horror film. No. But is it a decent Hellraiser movie? Yes. Is it a Hellraiser movie that is actually a Hellraiser movie? Yes. For that alone, I feel that it gets elevated above many of the direct-to-video sequels because it's actually doing and is actually being what it was meant to do and be. That's why I feel so protective of it, is because it was finally a Hellraiser movie again in the Hellraiser franchise. It's like if after A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, we'd suddenly really stopped getting Freddy Krueger as a dream demon serial killer, and it's like we had these like weird Dawson's Creek style teen dramas, and then randomly 5 minutes before the end, this burned up dude shows up and like says a couple of lines and kills the main character. And then all of a sudden, like A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 12 suddenly is about Freddy Krueger again. That's how I felt about Revelations, and why I feel so protective of it is that it was at least bringing the series back around to its roots, to its origins, to being Hellraiser again.
Well, on that note, I'm going to turn it over to you, Connor.
All right. So I appreciate a perspective like that. As somebody I like to think of myself as a defender of movies that people hate. I mean, that's the whole crux of that's the whole crux of Gabe and I's relationship ever since we started collaborating with each other. It's literally just been about defending movies that people think are bad. The first episode of this show all the way through to now, that's been the point, is to be a champion for things like that. And when I can't be a champion for a movie like that, it does make me sad to an extent. This movie to me is probably the worst major horror franchise entry of all time. I sometimes movies can be inoffensive to me. This one I spent money on to watch it sight unseen, which you can say shame on me. That's fine. I hate this movie. I've been so measured so far, but this just fucking sucks. I just hate it so much. I hate everything about it. I hate every minute of it. There are times where it's funny and it's great, but then I feel bad about myself for laughing at these professionals just trying to get a payday and just trying to make something happen. And Mama was a movie that sent me into a murderous rampage. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself after Mama, that viewing, after watching the end of that movie, and watching people defend that movie drove me crazy. This movie doesn't do that for me. This movie doesn't do that at all. But the fact that I only spent $3 on it, and that still is a waste of money, and it's not a Blu-ray disc on top of that, is just frustrating. And so you know what? Hellraiser Revelations, you do not deserve to be in this collection. You do not deserve to exist in my household anymore.
Can he do it, folks?
This fucking movie needs to burn in hell. Fuck Hellraiser Revelations. I'm never watching this goddamn movie again. And may God have mercy on the soul of the person who sold me this piece of shit.
Who knew that DVDs were so bendable?
I know.
Poor Connor was just like, it was like trying to tear apart a floppy disk.
Here's a piece of it. I'll sign this and send it to Gabe.
Yeah, the hanging on the Not That Bad Hall of Fame wall.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna start a box of memorabilia from the show. Hopefully, I don't have any other discs that I break. Honestly, I'm sad that I did that.
let me split the difference here.
Yeah.
But you know, fine points have been made. You know, there were fine people on both sides. You know, I have to come at this from a very dispassionate place. Unfortunately, the only things that registered for this were the flubs, were the blemishes, were the things that really made me feel like I was watching not an entry in an A-list horror franchise, but a discarded production that was made for like tax write-off purposes, that has stumbled its way into my DVD. And honestly, that $300,000 budget, just 2 words: Hollywood accounting. There is something suspicious that happened behind the scenes. I'm just very convinced of that. So those were the things that registered. But what I could acknowledge too was what Preston has been pointing out, that this actually is a truer sequel in the most important sense, in the thematic sense. And I'm a very thematic viewer. I love seeing the through lines of themes, of motifs, of statements. I love seeing that consistency throughout a franchise. And yeah, obviously the direct-to-DVD era of Hellraiser was critically missing that, and that's why I've checked out of it. I mean, if they could have continued that, I would have put up with some shoddy writing, some shoddy effects. I basically put up with that in the first couple of Hellraiser movies to one extent or another. They all have their flaws, if you ask me. But I could have put up with all of that, and I did put up with it in Revelations. Even though it was to a devastatingly embarrassing extent. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to mediate all of these things, these the two halves here, and what it comes down to is rewatchability. And this is more rewatchable for me because it contains both a little bit of substance to chew on, and more importantly, what a candidate for bad movie night. Nico,
Nico.
I would never do that to you, Nico. I would never
simply
say,
had to get out of this Generica.
I would never say
God.
your movie is that bad, Nico. What I would say though is that it is not that bad. It's very far from being actually good. Very far. It's probably the biggest gap for me between not that bad and actually good that we've had. But it is there. It did land there. And I'm glad I finally saw it after hearing everybody talk about it, shit on it, and now try to pretend it never happened. I'm actually glad that I saw it. Now I can join that conversation, and maybe I can be some kind of at least moderating voice for all of the intense furiosity that comes the way of this movie. So no worries. I don't have a DVD copy of it, but if I did, it would remain safe and intact and on my shelf. Not where I keep the prouder titles in my collection, but it would be somewhere towards the bottom. So we have to thank our guest Preston for bringing this to us once again, and for getting us the conversation that's eluded us, not just about this movie, but about the Hellraiser franchise. We've never 100%. Talked about the franchise in any depth. So thank you, Preston.
And thank you for having me. This was a blast.
And where can our audience go to support you? Your books, your writings, all of that. Where should they go to support you?
You can find me on Amazon. Is my name going to be printed on this?
It'll be in the description.
Yeah. So my name, I am one of these people whose name is not pronounced the way it's spelled. So I'll rely.
I realized that when you introduced yourself, so I felt very bad for not checking your pronunciation. I'm so jaded because of the way my name gets butchered. So I've continued the cycle of abuse, and I'm really sorry. The chain needs to be broken here.
No.
Yeah,
no, but fine.
But the links for Preston's writing, your author profiles and your books will be in the description. So check it out. Preston is, he's one of my favorite voices writing horror and writing about horror right now.
Thank you.
And, I want to thank you, Preston, for introducing me to Bill Landis. If anybody wants to read about a real a really underappreciated figure in horror history. Check out Preston's biography of Bill Landis. And I also heard some exciting news, Preston, that your audiobook has some star power narrating it.
Yeah, the audiobook of Landis, The Story of a Real Man on 42nd Street, is narrated by Kelly Maroney of Chopping Mall and Night of the Comet fame.
Really big fan of Night of
Yes.
the Comet myself, so that was awesome
Really
to
big
hear.
chopping mall fan.
So look
Huge
at that.
chopping mall fan.
We've just completely split the difference here. You
Yeah.
know, you get very two different sides of fandom here
Oh
in
yeah.
this podcast. I've never seen Chopping Mall.
Oh, dude, you got to see Chopping Mall. You
What?
gotta see Chopping
I
Mall.
have
It's
seen
so fun.
hold on. I have seen Phantom of the Mall, which was shot at the same mall as Shopping Mall.
I
Um,
Okay.
think I think every 80s movie shot in California that had anything to do with a mall was shot at that mall.
Yeah.
Because I actually believe scenes in Night of the Comet are also shot at that mall.
that wouldn't be surprising. Yeah.
Fast Times at Ridgemont High was shot at that mall because Kelly was saying something on Facebook not too long ago about how like all of the movies she's known for from the 80s, she basically just kept going back to this
Back to that
mall to
mall.
shoot scenes at this mall.
Yeah, I'm planning on a double feature, Phantom of the Mall and Shopping Mall.
Yes.
I think that'd be an awesome double
Mm,
feature. So
may I offer a strange alternative to Phantom of the Mall?
Phantom of the Mall is a stone cold classic in this household, but continue. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So this is one of the deepest cut weird cameo slash references, but Chopping Mall is a strange pseudo sequel to another
Yes, it
movie
is.
called, yeah, it's called Eating Raoul.
Yep.
What?
There's a movie there's a movie with Mary Woronov and Paul Bartel and the dude who played Chakotay on Star Trek Voyager, Robert Beltran.
Yep.
It's called Eating Raoul. And for reasons that I'm not 100% sure on, characters from Eating Raoul pop up in the first half hour of Chopping Mall and then just kind of disappear. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like, by the way, these people are like still running around out there. And it's this very strange, very unique movie about I don't want to ruin it. It's not quite like another movie that you've seen, but it's a interesting
How
double.
how strong is the connection to Shopping Mall?
Some
Two
characters.
two of the protagonists from Eating Raoul, two of the main characters pop up in the beginning of Chopping Mall.
Or what,
As a
like Jay and
cameo.
Silent Bob? Or is it
Kind
Uh, I kind
kind
of
of,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
actually that's pretty accurate. Yeah, that's
yeah.
exactly
okay?
how it is. It's a fun I recommend watching the other movie before you watch Chopping Mall because then it's
Yes.
like a funny like, oh, okay. Like why are they in this? Okay. All right. Well, let's just get on with the mayhem.
The,
Okay, well
the,
then maybe I'll have to make it a triple feature. How
okay.
about that?
Do
Okay.
that. Yeah, go
Yeah.
for it. But
The
Chopping Mall is very fun.
An
Definitely
unofficial
recommend.
trilogy on the level of John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Uh,
And by the way, I do want to say as we get ready to whore ourselves out on the show, I do think it's important that if anybody watching this is interested, definitely recommend checking out his article, Preston's article about this movie from Fangoria. The sound bite that you heard from Gabe, the quote that was very solid from that article. There's plenty like that. I learned a lot reading it. I learned a lot about his insight on the film as well. So I think it's an important read. We'll link that in the description below as well, so that people can kind of get a chance to expand maybe their knowledge about the film and expand within Preston's knowledge and
hmm.
feelings as well.
Also,
Um,
if anybody wants to see Preston die for any reason, to go watch VFW. That
Yeah.
was
yeah, I guess
Yeah.
if you really didn't like his take on Hellraiser Revelations, you
Then
can
you
watch him die.
Yeah, you could, if you don't blink and you watch very carefully, you can see me get a punji trap made out of a beer keg and then get bludgeoned to death by William Sadler.
yeah. And I just bring that up because when I first talked to Preston, and I just for whatever reason just mentioned that I was a big fan of VFW and Joe Bagos, he said, "Oh, you've seen me die then." So
That's a Hey, that's a
that's
great way to introduce yourself to somebody, I
getting
think.
killed by William Sadler is that's an honor beyond any
Oh
awards or
yeah.
accolades. That's the highest honor I think anybody in our field could achieve.
Oscar who? Yeah, no, seriously, can't wait I can't wait to check that out myself now. So that'll be
You've never
awesome.
seen VFW, Connor?
No,
No,
no, I have
it's
not.
awesome. It's great. It's great.
It's always been on my watch list, like especially as I call an horror. There's like a whole era of my horror fandom called the horror pack era, where I was where I subscribed to the horror pack subscription, and that's how I was getting all my knowledge of movies. And so if it had a cover like the horror pack originals, I was like super into it. So I've seen obviously the cover of VFW before, and I've seen it, and it's been on my watch list forever. But Gabe, you know this better than anybody. If you're waiting for me to watch a movie, you're gonna probably die before I watch it. So, yes, I will be checking that out. And of course, anybody out there listening, we would love for you to to support the filmmakers out there by watching our friend here pass away. So that is welcome, believe it or not. Regardless, though, you can also support this show if you'd like.
Yes, you
We
can.
have a couple of ways to support our show. If you'd like, we have a website. Not well, it was notthatbadpod.com. I was about to say that again, but this time it's thatbadmedia.com. Has all of the links to all of our individual shows. You can go to our YouTube from there. Notthatbadpod.com does still work. It takes you straight to Not That Bad's page on the That Bad Media website. There's of course bios about your two favorite or least favorite hosts of a podcast, your boys here, and now even how this show began. So definitely recommend checking that out. But our relationship, liking, commenting, subscribing, it's in a great place. It's in a fantastic place. But if you want to spring a little bit more, if you want to take our relationship to the next level, Gabe, how can they do that?
Well, it's funny you should ask, Connor, because we just uploaded new content to our Patreon. I reacted
Yes.
to Variety's top 100 list of the best horror movies in their judgment. It's a movie that nerds online have been fighting about. I actually ended up being quite happy with the list, as you'll see. But if you also subscribe to the Patreon, you can see vaulted episodes where we defend the likes of the Super Mario Brothers movie, the original Mortal Kombat movie. You can see all of this long before anybody else on the face of the planet does.
Yes.
Which is, I mean, it's really quite a privilege when I put it that way. So I don't know why you're not already subscribing to
Pay
the
for that
Patreon
privilege,
right
you peasants.
And of course, you can find us on social media. You can follow us on social media for our takes. You can follow us at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of that. You can also follow Preston on those platforms. What's your handle, Preston? Where can they find you?
Twitter, at Preston Fassel, and I found out recently that I've actually got an Instagram that I've started to use. What's my handle? Because like Facebook automatically
You
created
found
it
out?
for
Oh,
me.
it created it
Yeah,
for you.
Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
didn't you
it's
didn't make it in a blackout stupor one day and you woke up with like, where did this Instagram account come from?
nope, it just Facebook created it for me. PA Fossil is my Twitter handle.
Okay. Perfect.
Right.
We'll make sure to link all of his stuff in the description, but definitely look him up
Right.
if you are interested.
Yeah, well, I am I think I'm done with the whoring. If I do any
Yeah.
more, I'm probably gonna get stabbed so I can be used as a sacrifice to bring back some frat boy. Or something or other. So on that
Her
note,
blood brought me back. Bring me more blood.
and I just got to say again to all the fans out there, I would never do that to you, Nico.
Oh my God.
You guys have to know that I would never do that to you, Nico.
Good Lord.
Wherever you are out there. So once again, I am Gabe.
I am Connor.
And that's Preston. And this is Not That Bad / That Bad Media. We changed the title recently, kind of having a hard time keeping track of it. But whoever we are signing out.